Well, hello again, guys. This is Christian Bassar speaking with another video of History Vice on the same day as the previous one. So, I got a two for today. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do it this week in history on this Friday. So, it's Friday today, so I might do it this week in history, so we might get 3 videos, so we'll see. But anyway, wanted to share with something with you guys today about, this is a bit more perhaps philosophical, but slightly historical. But instead of military history, it's religion. And I'm not trying to preach or anything like that. Just kind of give a little bit of a viewpoint on religious theology. A development that happened in the Middle Ages. And what's very interesting, I actually heard this on CBC Radio. Well, it was a podcast, but it was originally this broadcast was. I have some notes here. CBC. Yeah, it was on October 29th, 2012, so earlier this year. And so basically, there's this show called, anybody who listens to the CBC is probably familiar with the show called Ideas. They talk about philosophy, and historical subjects, and political things like that. A very interesting show. I remember listening to it actually as a kid, and it has in 1997. Apparently, the show has been running since at least like 1961. You can see it on CBC's website, cbc.ca. But anyway, so according to this, this show was doing a series in October called "The Myth of the Secular," talking about how secular philosophy is basically talking about, separating church and state and moving away from religion or doing away with it. But a lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, this is a different, that's not really a right way to do things, or not a good way to look at history. Where secularism was talking about religion as a very individual thing. It's almost a thing of personal preference. It's an individual thing, it's like styles of clothes. But on the show, in the series, many people are actually talking about, wait a minute, religion is not just an individual thing, because it's also a very cultural thing. We see that in religious wars. We have Al-Qaeda and other Islamist extremist terrorist groups and things like that, and we have similar Christian maybe not terrorist groups, but certainly Christian influenced extremist groups like Christian Identity and things like that. And so, there's definitely, and that affects society. So if someone's religion does not necessarily just affect himself. And when you get multiple people together, then a whole country can be affected. And also religion greatly affects history. I also heard today, I think it was part 2 of the series I was listening to today, where basically you have 2 different countries, where it was England and France, and England and France are relatively close together geographically, but culturally they are extremely different. Of course, Britain has kind of a very mixed pot of religious organizations. There are very many independent churches. There's sort of an established church with the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, or Episcopalian according to American vocabulary. And so, that certainly influenced it, but Henry VIII obviously created the Anglican Church in the 1500s. And in rebellion against the Pope and the Catholic Church. So basically, Britain had a much more loosey-goosey approach to churchhood, while the French had it was a mono, I don't know if the word mono church applies, but monolithic was the word used. The Catholic Church. The French society was built around the Catholic Church. And then by the time the French Revolution came, there was definitely this, religion was a bad thing. It was considered a bad thing, especially since it represented the Ancien Regime, under the kings, under the corrupt monarchy. And so religion became oppressed, and in fact, Napoleon had a bit of a problem because during the Revolution, a lot of good Catholic military commanders were executed, done away with during the Revolution and most likely the Reign of Terror. And so religion became a binding force, and after the Revolution, it was not a good thing to be religious. While in England, according to Ideas, this episode, because of the different churches, because of the not so rigid church structure in the country, there was more progress. It was a progressive thing, despite the fact that Christianity, in many ways, is associated with progressive political thinking, according to this idea. And they also contrasted communism. They talked about communism, where in Eastern Europe, like places like Ukraine, Lithuania, and all that, mostly Catholic or maybe Orthodox countries as well. But then under communism, after World War II, communism suppressed these religious movements, and then religion became this liberating force. It became a force of liberation. Like, we can certainly see that in Poland in the 1980s with the Solidarity movement. And Pope John Paul even gave his blessing to that movement under Waleska. So it's kind of an interesting thing there. So religion is clearly not just a thing for the individual. And an interesting thing, there's this kind of wrapping up my thoughts here, but I'll just look up something. I actually was listening to this, and I sent a text message to myself to write this down, because I thought this was really fascinating here. So basically, there was a theologian or a philosopher on Ideas. I don't remember his name, but he's part of a movement. Let me put on my reading glasses here. They're not reading glasses. Seriously, I'm almost blind without them. So anyway, this philosopher, theologian, he was in England, where actually I've heard more than half of the population is non-religious or atheist. And so basically, this theologian was part of a movement or thought called radical orthodoxy. Interesting. I love the terms of religion. It's great. So basically, radical people that follow this idea of radical orthodoxy, they view theology as taking a wrong turn during the Middle Ages. So up until the time of Thomas Aquinas, let's see, what were the dates again? In the 1200s. And it was, so up until then, people thought that people saw creation, the world, the natural world, clouds, weather, everything, is kind of an expression of God. God is expressing himself through this. Since God could not be experienced directly, so I guess this could be kind of seen if you read the Old Testament of the Bible, where Moses could not see the face of God. I don't know if this is a direct. Maybe I haven't read any of Thomas Aquinas' works, but I would love to. This might be where he got that idea, where basically God, of course, we can't see, in Thomas Aquinas' view, we can't see God, we can't touch him, we can't taste, we can't experience it with our five senses. So you'd have to so people trying to experience God would have to experience him through a sixth sense. So kind of a spiritual sense, something of the soul, something that's not explained by science. So you have that, and so basically the world expresses God indirectly through creation. And this idea was known as analogy. And this was kind of so everything points to God. I guess that would kind of match too with the Catholic system of sacraments. There's the instruments or avenues of grace. I'm not sure exactly, but what the term is. But you have communion. It's not a literal representation of Jesus' body and blood. Well, they believe that through transubstantiation. I love saying that word. That the the bread becomes the body and the wine becomes the blood and everything like that. But the sacraments are kind of a way to the grace of God and to the spiritual blessings and everything. And so so in the same way, Aquinas was saying that creation was kind of a bridge, so to speak, to God. And so where these radical Orthodoxians, I don't know if that's the right word, but people who follow radical Orthodoxy, they say that after Aquinas, medieval theology took a wrong turn, and under theologians as Dun Scolus, theologians started to go, instead of this resonance, creation being a resonance of God, instead of that, they go on to this idea, they focus on the will of God, which is so inscrutable, so unfathomable. There's no God's will is kind of unknowable, and so there's so many people focused on this, and God became seen as this great power, this ultimate power that holds everything together, has the destiny of every person in his hands. And so, but then there became this idea that items in the world, creation, became individual things, not necessarily a resonance of God, but became things on their own. So then this led to secularism. So items became a thing that were knowable. Like, God was not knowable, he was so far above nature, but nature was observable. So therefore, science becomes important, and secularism, reason. So certainly during like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and everything like that. So that's kind of when that takes flight. So what's interesting about these radical Orthodoxians, I'll use that word. I don't know if Orthodoxians is a word, but so what's very interesting there is they're trying to go maybe a bit back and kind of see that through acts of worship, through all these things, that God can be so quote unquote experienced through those things. And so therefore God is not this abstract idea, but actually present in the world. So anyway, that was kind of an interesting thing I wanted to throw out there. Kind of took a philosophical turn, kind of going away from military history today, but kind of going more theology and that kind of thing. So not so much history, but a little bit. Thomas Aquinas was like 800 years ago, so that is a bit historical there. So, and it can certainly explain, like, partially, according to the information given on ideas, that Dun Scolus's thinking kind of led to kind of a secularism, and certainly influenced for sure. And so I was listening to that, and that was very interesting. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. And so anyway, you guys enjoy your Friday, and we'll talk to you later.